You should listen to the zip code plays because we've been apart from each other for too long. And this is a way of bringing yourself back into the place that we live or a place that we know, because there have been listeners from literally all over the world. LA is a world city. And the stories that you hear are going to, no matter where you're sitting, are going to remind you of people and places you know. And if it works the way that we should, you'll feel encouraged. You'll feel love, tension, hate, revenge, you know, and it, I hope, will start you on the journey of thinking about your neighborhood and your street and the stories that you might be missing, the stories that you want to tell your friends, lovers, families, kids before those stories disappear, because that's the connective tissue that'll prepare us for the next pandemic, the next challenge, and make us a stronger people. Hi, I'm Mildred Lewis, and if you want to learn more about my zip code play, $10 and a Tambourine, as well as the Antaeus Theatre Company, watch this video. I first heard about the Antaeus zip code plays as a listener. I honestly I had been to the theater, but obviously we were in a pandemic and nobody's going to the theater. And I just simply stumbled upon it and I was blown away. The first play that I heard was Carrie Wyatt's play about South Central. My godmother lives in South Central, and I was like thrilled, first of all, to hear a depiction of a community that I love and feel so close to, represented in a way that was interesting and not stereotypical and luscious. And the other thing that struck me was that the sound design was so on point. I used to teach audio techniques years ago, and I love sound. I still play the cello and piano. And so when I'm listening to work on, whether it's plays for us or, theater works, I really listen to the sound design. And I thought, these are people who are taking great care and understand the difference between like what would work on a stage versus what has to work in the theater of the mind. So once I heard that, I was hooked, and I didn't think that we'd have an opportunity to submit. And when the call went out to playwright members, playwright unit members, I was like on it like a flash fire. I'd always wanted to do a piece about Amy Semple McPherson, who's been around, sort of lately, she's such an important part of LA history. And I thought, what if I could write a radio play that sums up all the complex feelings that I have about Los Angeles? And, they gratefully accepted it. We developed it. The main story arc for $10 and a Tambourine is Amy Semple McPherson. And I wanted to tell a story about a woman who was torn in two directions. First of all, she's this huge celebrity, actually much bigger than sort of the mega pastors or the televangelists that we know today. She sort of set the template for that. But she was involved with politics. She was an amazing humanitarian. I mean, she founded one of the major Christian denominations, the Foursquare Gospel, that's still in operation today. Her charitable work. There's an Angelus Temple still on 54th Street near Crenshaw, which is where I get my car washed. And you still hear some of the old timers talk about how she provided charity to their parents and never made them feel less than, never made them feel like they lost their dignity. And I thought, who is this woman, who has meant so much to LA? And so I wound up doing a play about her being torn between her mentor, who at this point is dead, he's a ghost, and that is Reverend Seymour, who is a one-eyed Black preacher, extraordinary man, comes from the South, goes to a Black Baptist college, leaves because it's not conservative enough for him, comes out and founds this Azusa revival, which goes on for years. And he invites Amy Semple McPherson, who at that time was having trouble in her marriage, to come out and preach, and was a sort of mentor figure to her. So on one side, we've got the Reverend coming from beyond the grave saying, hey, listen, you're too into this celebrity stuff. You're mixing around with like Charlie Chaplin. Her church in Echo Park wasn't too far from the original Hollywood. Max Sennett and the Keystone Cops used to literally like drive their motorcycles into Echo Park Lake. So Seymour comes back from the grave and he's like, got to do better. No celebrities. But then the threat comes, William Mulholland, who we know from Chinatown. And his thing is, I want a city that reflects my engineering expertise. I mean, he's the one who was largely responsible for us having water that allowed LA to become what it has become. Um, but he wasn't a perfect man. And he had a vision for LA that was a little bit rigid. And he's coming and saying, we don't want all these faith healers, snake charmers, people like you. I don't mind you doing the charity, but I want you to do it less. And I want you to sort of take a step back. So the play is really about this flamboyant, amazing woman being torn between these two characters and then deciding to fight on in her own way. When you're thinking about radio and thinking about podcasts, you have to think entirely differently than you do for the theater. Because they're not going to be able to see. And that seems like an easy thing, yeah, that you just like can translate one thing to another, but it's not easy at all. You really, because a lot of things that you might see on stage, you have to find a way, an analog for that with sound. So I think that what the company did was absolutely brilliant. They assigned me Gigi Birmingham, who's a wonderful actor who is also a director. But the first conversations I had were with Jeff Gardner, who recently won recognition, decade recognition for his excellence in sound design. And those things were absolutely essential because what it allowed me to do was to sort of, I'd written for radio before. Years ago, I had something WBAI in New York. And in the last 3 or 4 years, I had 2 plays done on KPFK Pacifica. So I'd written for radio before, and I knew, and I taught sound techniques. But it's a different thing when it's really your play and you're excited and thrilled and, sort of over the moon about, this being your first major outing with a new company. Jeff really helped me refine my ideas about the complexity of sound, so that by the time Gigi came on board, we had something to hand to her that was really rich in terms of its soundscape, really sophisticated. Gigi came on, added some wonderful ideas, making Mulholland much more of an antagonist in the piece, sharpening the conflict. And then we had 3 terrific actors: Eve Gordon, who I knew from ESTLA, the wonderful Mike McShane, who's just a terrific, terrific actor, and Leonard House, who's got this wonderful voice, and understood the spirit of Reverend Seymour, that he is both conservative and playful, that he is a mentor to Amy Simple McPherson, but he's also a rival. So everybody brought something new to the table. 2 extensive rehearsals with a terrific stage manager, Nicole Sounsel. And then they actually hand delivered the sound setups to each actor. So I think you can see that I put my play into the hands of people who had really learned from the first round, who were completely committed to giving us not only a professional process, but a process that really deepened the art. I've heard so many plays on radio where you can tell it was just a play recorded for radio, as opposed to a play that was written and conceived for radio. And that's the difference that this process made. I want them to think about themselves in relationship to Los Angeles. I want people to mostly get out of it, here we are in this moment, in this now hopefully receding pandemic moment. And we're talking about 3 people who were at the birth of a great city. 2 who bring religion and spirit, which have been always important to Los Angeles, and 1 who represents the business sector. All of them well known. Reverend Seymour during the Azusa Street revival, literally thousands of people coming, 24 hours a day for months on end. Simple McPherson owned the radio station where the play is set. She was the first woman in California to own a radio station. Served literally hundreds of thousands of people, reached millions, had her own magazine, literally a media empire before we understood what media empires were. William Mulholland, is, such an insignificant figure and such a complex man. When we meet him in the play, he's lost his wife, and everyone agrees that that was a signal break, as it is for most people. But it's before the Francis River Dam disaster, so he's both personally devastated, but has never had a higher reputation for his success in bringing water to Los Angeles. So I want people to think about all the forces that bring something like a Los Angeles into play. But more than that, I want them to think about the forces that are operating on them and how they negotiate the challenges of their world with humor, with grace, as Simple McPherson does, and how they preserve their integrity. Because in the end, of course, Simple McPherson does not win. You know, she dies very young of a barbiturate as overdose, not sure whether it was accidental or a suicide. But ultimately, the pressures that she was under brought her to a dark place. And I think there's never been a better moment to think about that as we're looking at what's happening in the world around us. One of the things that we did is we worked as a team, which I think is so important. And we swapped scripts early on, and not so much to create like an intentional link between them, but so that we'd have a sense of what the larger universe was, and obviously to make the plays better. Really excited about Inglewood. I literally live like not even a quarter mile from the old Hollywood racetrack. And it's such a great story that Paula Sismar has told. West Hollywood, I used to work at City 10, the city cable channel. And so to see a story set in West Hollywood with so much of Shauna Abley's heart, I mean, you think of him as a horror guy. He's written so much for film and television in that world and in reality, but he does such a great job with this couple and this encounter they have with a new gentrifier. Pepper, I think, has done an incredible job. I mean, I'm just so excited for all of them. I mean, Elizabeth Wong is writing about some bingo players, like in the in the Asian parts of LA. And what I think we've done is to provide a non-stereotypical glimpse into aspects or places of LA that we often don't give too much thought to. One of the things I sort of believe about Los Angeles is that we think that there's no culture and think that there's no history, but we're living in an extraordinary place with many, many stories to tell. And things like the zip code plays are almost like these delightful appetizers that just give people a sense of like, this is where we are sitting. We're sitting on, you know, land that has not been seeded, of course, and we're sitting and building on the legacies of all these people who we really ought to know you know and building in communities. I mean, people talk about feeling isolated, but you think about the mahjong parlors and the bingo parlors in I mean, not Chinatown now, I mean, but more Monterey Park, Alhambra and so forth. And I think if we can plug into that, especially after this pandemic finally fades, we're going to be stronger people because we face some really significant challenges ahead, and those can't all be solved by theater, but theater can play a role in how we understand and frame those experiences, and not just in a teaching way, but in a way of bringing us together as a community. And radio is great for that because nobody has to go anywhere, and it's the theater of the mind. And these plays can all be enjoyed by like the whole family, which I think is awesome. I mean, essentially, Antaeus is doing what Pixar does. Where the kids can get one thing out of it, like in $10 in the Tambourine, my play, there are lots of really cool sound effects because they're in her radio station, and there were a lot of cool sounds that were happening in those early radio days. They're inventing the radio format at that time. So I think a kid or teen could get into that aspect of it along with the ghost aspect of it. I think when we go to West Hollywood, there are things to enjoy. Pepper's piece in Pacoima. I mean, how often do we make it to North LA and which is still so rich and so vibrant and changing like crazy. So I think it's adults, I think it's kids, I think it's people who want to enjoy the theater of the mind, and I think it can be deeply restorative. And I honestly think people should listen to the first season, to just kind of prep themselves for season 2. I think the zip code plays are a blast. It may have started as a way to just keep the company active during the pandemic, but I think it's grown far beyond that. I think that the the sort of tours through the areas of the city are something that, we're going to be looking at, for a long time to come. And it's a way, if you want to get your family into what is South Central like, what does it feel like to be there? I've heard so many scary things, or Pacoima, who goes there? I think when you listen to the play and you look at the companion material, you're going to understand that we are part of a city. This is not just a megalopolis. This is not just a region, but we're a part of what's going on. And at the same time, you'll be deeply entertained. I mean, you can't get better actors than we have. I mean, and it's not just that these are actors that you'll recognize from big name theater productions or film and TV productions. Of course you will. But it's more the commitment and the quality that's going to sing for you. And the company, I think, speaks for itself. I mean, not everybody's going to be into a classical mindset. I understand that. I accept it. I respect it. But I don't think we can afford to lose track of that. That's something we need to bring forward with us. For me, it's about expanding the canon, making it so that we respect and revere more work, so more people have the opportunity to become regarded as classical authors, as the voices for our time, rather than, sort of bifurcating ourselves. Um, and yeah, if we do that, if we abandon the classics, if we abandon the classical sensibility, I think we lose something very vital. First of all, I enjoyed this conversation. I hope that you enjoyed this conversation as well. I really need you to go to Stage Explorations. It's on YouTube, and I need you to do what we all need to do. Click like and subscribe. It'll give you the opportunity to hear from so many theater makers, many of whom are doing amazing work that you might never have heard of, that might have just gotten lost in the noise. And you're going to see that there are dozens of videos, makers who you might not have heard of, but as soon as you see them, they're people that you'll want to follow in the Los Angeles theater community, on television, on film, and in the digital space. So please go to Stage Explorations. They're on YouTube. Click like and then subscribe. If you enjoyed our talk as well, consider following what Antaeus is doing. We're on Instagram, we're on Facebook, we're on Twitter. You can go to Antaeus, ANTAEUS.org, and see if it's something that you might enjoy. We would love to have you as collaborators, audience members, and just part of our broader community. We're here to serve you. And if you get engaged with us, we hope to earn a repeat visit and maybe a little bit of collaboration.